Okay, we're right at the top of the hour, and I think we'll get started. Good afternoon. I want to thank you all for joining us for a special webinar on teleworking during COVID-19. Today, we'll be focusing on strategies and best practices which employers can quickly deploy to help them with the challenges of having to implement or vastly expand their existing remote working capabilities. My name is Russell McDermott, and I'm the Program Director for CT Rides. I'll also serve as one of today's presenters and moderator for this session. I'm joined also today by two teleworking experts who I've had the pleasure of working with over the years. The first is Elham Shirazi, who is the principal of ePlanning and is a nationally recognized telework expert with over 30 years experience and has worked with large, medium, and small organizations in the country to develop, implement, and consult on their remote working practices. I'm also joined by Drew Kaliszewski, who is the Vice President of Partner Consulting. Drew has over 25 years of experience in the telecom and IT industry and has worked with many organizations here in Connecticut to analyze and launch the technical infrastructure of organizations of all sizes. I'm happy to say both Elham and Drew work with me on the CT Rides program to provide these and other services to businesses in Connecticut. Before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules. All participants will be muted for the duration of the webinar. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A tab, and we will do our very best to answer them during the Q&A section at the end. We're going to also have a copy of the webinar available for you to view on our website at ctrides.com. And lastly, your feedback is extremely valuable to us. We would greatly appreciate it if you took the time to let us know how we did. You'll receive a copy of this survey both in your browser at the end of the webinar and via email. So to get started, just a little bit about us at CT Rides. We're a program of the Connecticut Department of Transportation, and we offer services that help employees find better commutes than driving alone to work, and that in turn helps them with being more productive, improves businesses' bottom lines, and reduces emissions for a healthier environment. As part of that, we offer expert advice and assistance to help companies develop on-site transportation demand management programs, which include telework solutions. Before I get started, the one point I like to stress with everyone is that there is no cost to companies who are located in Connecticut to utilize our services. And for more information on those, you can again go to ctrides.com. For today's webinar, we're going to be focusing on our teleworking services specifically, which primarily focus on providing both HR and technology consultant services. The Department of Transportation, through its TDM program CT Rides, has been supporting telework for businesses in Connecticut since the mid-90s, and believe it or not, it's actually been nationally recognized for being one of the earliest adopters in the field. But our famous winter weather has actually proved to be somewhat of an advantage for us, as it has provided our team with the experience of developing programs for business continuity, especially when dealing with winter storms and or nor'easters. For most, if not all of us, this is uncharted territory when we look at the scope, length, and uncertainty of this situation that we're all in. And as such, this webinar will be a little unique from some of the ones we've done in the past. Because rather than focusing on all of the different things that lead up to a successful teleworking program, such as developing the business case and developing different policies and agreements, we're now going to focus on the situation that we're all in. And that is, now that we've had to implement or greatly expand our existing remote work programs, how do we now position ourselves for success? And with that, I'm happy to introduce Elham to discuss some of those best practices and strategies. Elham?
Thank you so much, Russell, for that introduction. And good afternoon to all of you for joining us for best practices and strategies on teleworking. I wanted to, just remind everybody that typically when employers consider teleworking, there are a number of reasons that go into that decision. Amongst those are probably reasons such as improving productivity, recruitment and retention, morale, and sustainability, but also to prepare for business continuity. Unfortunately, today we're in a position where we are not preparing, but we are trying to really, set ourselves up for social distancing and making sure that we are flattening the curve, as they say, for as far as teleworking is considered. So a lot of your organizations have probably gone from maybe 0 to 100 in terms of setting up teleworking or telecommuting, whereby it might have not been a practice before. So in today's reality, obviously we're not dealing with an ideal world for implementing teleworking, in the sense that we didn't prepare, we didn't set up pilots. We, for some, and maybe some of you already had some informal programs, or maybe some larger employers did have some, programs, but we didn't have the time to develop a policy, a guideline, or parameters on what this program is about and what the teleworking arrangement looks like. So, we've been kind of pushed into this situation as far as an employer is concerned, when not only do the employees go home to work, but the kids, the young adults, maybe, older parents, whatever your living situation is, that everybody is thrown into the same environment. However, as difficult as this may sound, we are in a unique position to test teleworking so that when everything goes back to normal, we can make some better decisions for the future of working remotely. And we're going to learn a lot of lessons. I think every week your teleworking arrangement is going to get stronger and stronger. And hopefully when we're back to a normal situation, we'll see employers that are doing this a little bit more often, maybe a few times a week, not full time. So a few things that I wanted to share with you, not only about work, but also about life in general these days, is please don't overreact. Everybody's stressed out. Everybody's finding themselves in a very different situation. So be calm, be optimistic as managers. Usually managers lead their employees, and we want to make sure that we have a tone that makes everybody feel comfortable. At the same time, be forgiving and understanding. And what I mean by that is, there are times when employees are teleworking, and just because of the situation, their child might walk into their workspace, and they might have to say something like, "Go to sleep." This is unusual. Usually, when teleworking is in place, we tell employees you cannot have disruptions like that. But in today's world, we have to know that some of that may be difficult. So the whole point is update and change as your program goes along, and make some, make sure that we're learning. In today's work environment, managers play a big role. And I'm assuming that a lot of you are on this call because you manage people who are working remotely. And we want to make sure that managers are creating a work environment that not only maximizes the productivity of staff, but also realizes that there are limitations of technology, because you haven't maybe had time to build a robust technology for your work at home. We have to deal with whatever trust there is in the workplace. We have to deal with established relationships and communication strategies, But all of this in the midst of employees having to deal with children, young adults, taking care of sick family and friends, and lack of appropriate space for teleworking, and life and whatever else it throws us. So this is not the usual environment that we try to implement teleworking in. As managers, you have different styles in terms of, talking and giving tasks and objectives to your employees. None of this is going to change in the context of remote work. And what I mean by that is you may have some employees that you are directing, meaning that you have to be very precise about what is the work that's being done and what your expectations are, and that's not going to change. You may have employees that you're coaching, meaning that they know what they're supposed to do, but they're still learning, and you have to still teach them some skills. So that is not going to change. If you have employees you're advising, meaning that they know the tasks, they pretty much can do it on their own, but you still have to confer and go back and forth. Or you may have employees that you delegate to. And by delegating, I mean you can just say one line and the employee knows exactly what it takes to get it done. So your style of management with individual employees will not change when they are working remotely. However, it's really important that, given the rapid, I would say, implementation of teleworking, that we still play a role with our employees in terms of letting them know what the goals are and the deliverables are in this setting. So primarily, we want to, first of all, assist employees in setting up maybe what their tasks are for the first week. And that could be in the form of a phone call or a video where you talk about what your expectations are. You want to define objectives and deliverables, be very clear what those deliverables will be, and establish some time frames. Typically, it's good to ask for an employee to send you an email acknowledging, this is what you talked about, here are the goals, here are the deliverables. And by the end of the first week, it is really, I would say it's a great strategy to give feedback and to let the employees, know how the week went, and let them know how their week, let them also tell you how their week went. You want to coach, so if there are things that didn't meet your expectations, you want to let them know, and then repeat this for the second week. What we're hoping is that eventually this will become second nature and that you won't have to do it every week. But going through this kind of an exercise really helps employees get organized and for you to get feedback on a periodic basis. So let's talk a little bit about communication standards. Here's some questions that I want you to think about. How is teleworking going to change some of your communications? You need to think about your style of management and how do you approach employees? How do you contact them? Do you walk down the hall, go to their cubicles and give them input? Or do you just send an email to let them know? Do you pick up the phone? So I really want managers to think through how they contact their employees and how might this change in the context of teleworking. Obviously, we're not going to be able to just walk down, the hall and give feedback. So we are going to resort to a lot more in terms of telephonic or electronic communications. So what happens, to brainstorming in this environment or impromptu communications? What I really want you to do is when you are having, a brainstorming session with one person, to pause as managers and say, okay, who else needs to be involved in this conversation? and then try to bring everybody else to the table by contacting them either through text or chat or, setting up an informal meeting, but making sure that you've got the key people who usually help you with, some of those impromptu, informal communications that probably lead to great ideas. Before we go on, what happens to, is it okay to interrupt? I did want to share with you that given the, the situation today, it's totally okay to interrupt people and to ask questions. So whether you're a manager, whether you're an employee, it is okay to make a call, to send an email, to send a chat in this environment. It may take the other person 15 minutes to get back to you, because again, let's not forget that their home environment is not something that they're controlling right now. But don't feel bad about doing that, because that's how work is going to get done. And another consideration, I think, in teleworking should be for a manager and an employee to discuss what are going to be the core hours of working and what hours can be flexed. I have come across many families who are sharing childcare duties right now. So maybe one of the partners is taking, care of the childcare needs in the morning, while the other partner is working, and in the afternoon they switch positions. So make sure that you and your employees have established what are the hours that, maybe they can start sooner, maybe they can start a little bit later and end later, but also what are the core hours that, they can be available and others can be available. A few other things that are important to mention in the context of accessibility and your employees is that we need to be very direct in letting people know when they are available, and that basically if they're teleworking, they should be accessible. Maybe it's not by phone, maybe it could be, again, electronically, but accessibility during the agreed upon work hours is key. So again, we have to be forgiving if someone doesn't get back to us right away, but if they're home and they're working, then we are expecting for them to get back to us. Contact numbers should be shared, cell phone numbers, landline numbers, emails, chat numbers, all of that should be shared between employees and their coworkers. Some of you probably already maintain an electronic calendar that you share with others in your organization, whereby it's easy to know when people are available for a meeting and when they're not. I would say that please update this electronic calendar to make sure that not only do you have your business meetings on that calendar, but also if there's personal non-available time, that it's clearly on the calendar, so that everybody knows how to make the best use of your time. A few more tips on communications. I do want to say that it's really helpful if you have a video collaboration platform, such as, and I know that Drew's going to go into this later in the presentation, such as Teams or Zoom or something else, that it's really important to make sure that you have FaceTime with your employees, and employees have it with their coworkers, because working at home full-time can be a little bit difficult. So that FaceTime helps break up the loneliness and the isolation. Definitely, if you have video, if not audio, make sure that at least once a week you are scheduling meetings with your employees, so that you are talking, you are going over, what's happening. And in this situation, it's not unusual to actually also give employees a chance to talk about their personal lives. They may want to, just tell you what's going on with themselves. As far as teamwork, there has to be direction from management in terms of when attendance is required telephonically or electronically. So be very clear. Say if you want all hands on deck, then you want all hands on deck, and hopefully your employees can clear the time for that meeting. Every meeting, now remember, we're going to be completely shifting into a virtual environment. You're not going to be walking into a room where someone's sitting at the head of the table, and when people have questions, they raise their hands or they show a gesture. So every meeting should have a lead with an agenda and with clear topics and speakers. And you want to establish that ahead of time. We highly recommend that you do have 15-minute team huddles as needed. So just get the team together. It might be just for coffee, but it gives the chance for everybody to learn from each other, find out what's working, not working. And I've even actually seen anecdotes about employees who are showing their home offices and saying, this is the environment I'm working in, and they're my kids, there's my, spouse or partner, just to personalize it a little bit. I did mention that working alone can, cause depression. I think we really need to think about employees who are totally by themselves. They may not have other family members, and, try to break up their day. And also make sure that they don't work without taking breaks and taking lunch away from their desk, and also stopping at a particular time. Very important to this whole environment is making sure that teleworkers are trained on whatever collaborative technology you're offering. So if your employees are not trained, make sure they have tutorials and allow them time to learn the tools. The investment we make into, our employees coming on board and becoming virtual is really worth it in the long run. So a few tips that I would like to share with you are that, make sure that you're doing those team huddles, as I talked about. Make sure that you're building trust, because your teleworkers may come across certain issues and problems, and you want them to involve you in finding solutions and in making changes that will make them more effective. Make sure also that your employees have work-life balance. As I said before, you don't want them to work endlessly and without a break. And also watch out if it seems like they've been in their office from and they're sending emails from 8 to 10 o'clock at night. That's not a good sign. A lot of people have a hard time having an end to their workday and basically powering off. So we want you to act on problems as they arise, troubleshoot as soon as it comes up, be honest with teleworkers, get feedback from, other people about how the work is going. And, there is an adjustment period initially, so it does take a little while for people to get used to this. I mean, our hope is that your employees get better and better every week. We don't know when we're going to have to stop, teleworking and hopefully social distancing. And I bet you there's going to be a big, huge party when we all can go back to the office, but there is an adjustment period. And make sure that you have feedback loops so that you're getting, your employees together, finding out, especially in the first few weeks, how did the week go? How did the technology work? How did the collaboration work? And make sure that you are making changes. At this point, I'm going to pause and hand it over to my colleague, Drew, to talk about technology.
Well, thank you, Elham. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to say before I get started, I'd like to congratulate everybody on this call who's actually trying telework for the first time right now. I know that we were kind of thrown into this in a hurry, and for some of us, it may not be ideal. We don't have our home set up exactly optimized just yet, but I just wanted to share with you that, we're all in this together. And, with that being said, right now is actually a really exciting time for technology to support work in remote locations, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So today, what I'd like to do is go through a few strategies for using technology to conduct business remotely. I'll share with you some best practices that should help you get started with setting up your team or your business with setting people up for success to work remotely with technology, and I'll provide you with a few recommendations. So some of the strategies that we'll go over as we took a look at this is really three areas when we look to set up a remote workforce. One of them, the first one on the top left of this chart, really what we're trying to do is look at ways to use technology to set our team up for success. We try to understand and look for tools that we could put in place that'll help them communicate, that'll help them do their jobs, be able to share files, to give them access to applications that they need to perform, and to allow them to do that in a remote setting in their home. The second item is technology to minimize and eliminate travel. And I think what we're finding now is we are restricted with travel. So those of you who end up doing conferences or seminars or perhaps town hall meetings, we're now going to have to depend on the technology. We're still going to want to try to communicate and do those things, but we're going to turn to things more like we're doing today, a broadcast webinar. And lastly, it's important to not forget about your customers. And a lot of the tools that we'll use to collaborate with our teams could also be used to collaborate with our customers, whether it's a sales call or an appointment, or it's just a mechanism for allowing those customers who perhaps call you that would have maybe called you at the office to get them that call to the right place in your home office or to your remote workforce. And so here, really what I wanted to do was share with you some of the most common applications for for working from home. And this is just what we find. Simply put, there's three of them: file sharing, cloud applications, and collaboration. The reason why I think file sharing is an important one and sometimes gets overlooked is a lot of times the way we communicate is being in the office and having access perhaps to a shared drive and things like that. And when you're away from the office, it's hard to do a lot of sharing of files just by simply emailing them. And so having a file sharing application or software allows you to get around that. Cloud applications is another important aspect as well. Really what cloud applications are, and you may have heard the term software as a service, but it's a way for the software company to host that application for you, and they host it in the cloud. And if you remember a long time ago, when you had an application, usually you had to either install it or download it, and then perhaps the application got out of date, so then you had to apply updates to it or get a newer version. When we go over to the software as a service or a cloud application, those applications are really managed and maintained by the people who manage that cloud. And really one of the big advantages to that is when they're in the cloud, they're available and accessible anywhere at any time, which makes it perfect for remote locations. And then finally, collaboration, which is really the software that we'll use to communicate and work together, whether it's video conferencing or chatting, but that's all considered collaboration software. On this slide, what I wanted to share with you while we're talking about collaboration, some of the most popular collaboration applications that we see out there. And so I think you've probably heard most of these names before, but we'll start off with Cisco WebEx. Cisco WebEx has been around for a long time. It's a very dependable platform, and probably many of you on this call may have attended a Cisco WebEx conference, so it's probably a familiar name. One of the reasons why I think it might be helpful for businesses transitioning to telework is they do offer a free plan for businesses. It's a limited plan, but it's an easy way to get started with voice and video conferencing. And basically, the free plan offers up to, right now, it offers up to 100 participants that can get on a conference. And this is something that Cisco has done recently because of coronavirus. They've expanded that free offering. So it's a nice way to try the software and get used to it and see if it helps your organization. Office 365, which is a Microsoft product, and also Google, which has their the G Suite of tools. Those two are really pretty all-encompassing software applications. So more than just collaboration, they also provide the basic tools for word processing and spreadsheets. But the reason why I think they're important here is many of you are probably used to using those applications. And as we move into a home setting and we're looking for a way to collaborate, if you do have, let's say, for example, an Office 365 subscription, Teams may be included with that subscription. So we encourage you sometimes to just take a look at some of the things that you already have and see if you could put those in place, to collaborate and to start perhaps with those tools first. And Slack and Zoom on the right side of this chart, I would say they're kind of newer entries. Slack's been around since 2014 and Zoom since about 2011, but they've actually gained a lot of popularity over the last couple of years. Zoom, which is just a pretty easy, intuitive platform to use, and Slack, more because of the way it's designed. And what they look to be is really a replacement for email. They organize your thoughts and they organize your work by something called a channel that everybody can check and have access to. So rather than using email as a tool to communicate, Slack uses a channel and helps to organize your information a little bit better. Okay, so on this slide, we're just sharing some of the popular file sharing applications. And here again, what we recommend is if you already do have the Google G Suite or if you have Microsoft Office, you may want to look to using Google Drive or OneDrive because you already have it, and it's a good way to collaborate. What it'll do for you is a couple things. You can control the versioning, allow people to collaborate on the same document, and it'll also give you some permissions so that you could lock down certain files. Perhaps, certain people like the management team or the HR folks may only have access to certain files, and in other areas you may open up to more people depending on the type of work that they do. And, on this slide, I just wanted to share with you some other pretty common or pretty popular cloud applications, software as a service. I know many businesses are using the CRM tool Salesforce, which is a customer relationship management tool. So that works really well in the office. Because it's available as a cloud application, it actually works really well anywhere you are. Intuit is another one that's also pretty popular, and I know a lot of small businesses use QuickBooks, but if you're using the version of QuickBooks Online, here again, you have access to that software whether you're at home or at the office. So and on this slide, I wanted to share with you some common collaboration tools. So when you look to set up collaboration for your team when you're outside of the office and you're trying to use an application like Microsoft Teams, what we're really trying to do is replicate the types of things that went on in person in the office in a remote setting. So voice and video conferencing, they're going to have to take place now instead of having an in-person meeting. Screen sharing is another one that's very handy to use. And I think it's a good one to leverage more now that everyone should be working from home. The reason why I think is a lot of times we collaborate best when we can show somebody something. And what I find with screen sharing is if you use it right, you can actually keep everybody on the same page as you move through the things that you're trying to explain to them. Online whiteboarding is another application that's included with a lot of these collaboration tools. one of the best ways I think to collaborate and get your ideas across is to be able to go to that whiteboard and draw out a diagram and show some things. So there are tools that have online whiteboarding capability, and I'll be very open with you. Sometimes they're a little bit harder to get oriented to because you're drawing with your mouse, but once you get used to it, it is actually a good way to facilitate discussions. And the last two, presence and instant messaging, these kind of go together, but presence really becomes your way to see or understand which of your colleagues are available. So if you need to reach out to them and their presence indicates, perhaps maybe by a green dot next to their picture or next to their initials, if their presence indicates that they're available, that's probably the best time to shoot them a quick message or to give them a phone call. Presence can be used in a lot of different ways. Our presence at our office will show us, each of my colleagues, whether we're in a meeting or on the phone. And as an example, during this presentation, I put myself in a do not disturb presence just so that I could fully concentrate on this and not be interrupted. Those are just to give you some ideas. Really what we try to do is as much as we can, look for ways to emulate that in-person experience, but use remote tools to do it. So I wanted to give you an idea of some best practices to help you get started. Really, this slide right here would be consistent with what we would consider a telework technology assessment. And I think what we really want to do is take a look at what your requirements are for your business. How do you need to communicate? What applications do you need to do? And kind of list out all of your requirements. And then the second step would be to take a look at the technology that you already have in place. Do you have employees that can actually take a laptop home? If they're going to be responsible for invoicing, do you have a printer that you could give them that they could take home? Do you have a tool like Salesforce that could actually be used remotely? So really take a look at the things that you have in place today and that you could actually leverage without, spending more money or anything like that. And then finally, take a look at the things that you can't cover that you would like to do, but you basically have some gaps in your technology, so they won't allow you to do everything that you want to do. And we call that a gap analysis. And once you go through that gap analysis and you understand the things that you need to do, but you can't do with your current technology, then you can write those up as a set of business requirements. And that becomes your measuring stick as you evaluate new technologies so that you could really focus on what's important to you. And lastly, with regard to recommendations, we try to take a strategy of implement, optimize, and develop. And the line of thinking here is you've got to get started somewhere. So, start by implementing and trying some of the technologies. We like to recommend that you consider this kind of a long-term commitment. We don't really know how long there's going to be a coronavirus threat. So hopefully it's shorter, but if it ends up being longer, we're going to have to get used to and get efficient at conducting business this way and using the technology to support our needs. I think it will pay dividends longer term, because what will end up happening is these procedures that you put in place today and the technologies that you put in place today are going to serve as your business continuity plan, or at least some component of that, as we become very familiar with and comfortable with using these technologies at home. And also, I would say, look to optimize your environment. So, as you try some new tools or you get more involved in collaboration, try all the features, have fun with it, experiment with your team, and then start to evaluate, well, what really works well for our style of business, what doesn't, and then hone in on the things that work best for you. And then lastly, and I think this is really consistent with what Elham said earlier on this call, is, if possible, try to develop a video culture. And what we find with that is, Elham really said it best. FaceTime builds relationships. And I think when you can run a call with video, what ends up happening is you get to see facial expressions of people. You ensure that everybody's engaged. It helps you to control the meeting better. And I think what you'll find if you develop that video culture, that when people don't have their camera turned on, you really feel like something's missing. And with that, Russell, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that valuable information, Drew and Elham. I think it was some really good information you got out, and I especially like that both of you emphasize the fact that we're all in this together. We're all going through this new phase together. So, you know, I can't stress that enough. Now I want to bring everyone's attention to two really good resources. The first is the state's website with the latest information on COVID-19. I think our officials have done a really terrific job with keeping us updated and keeping this site in particular updated. The second one is our website, ctrides.com, where you can find a lot of great information on teleworking and all of our services. And again, please don't hesitate to contact us if you're in need of any of our no-cost services. Again, everything that we offer is no cost for companies that are located in Connecticut.